Keefe cancels practice. The Leafs ECHL team ceased operations, but spirits are good heading into tonight's game against the Tampa Bay Lightning. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leafs centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. If you haven't yet used Game Time or use the code LOCKEDONNHL, there's a game tonight. You could use the $20 off, get yourself a ticket, be in the building for Leafs Lightning with a chance for Toronto to book their ticket into the Stanley Cup playoffs. Dave, you excited for tonight?
Of course. Anytime you can kind of put the ease of whether or not you get the clinching scenarios out of the way, it's always a good night, especially if you do it against a divisional opponent and a team you won, you broke that playoff drought against as well.
Yes, yeah, obviously. It may be a little bit sweeter to do so against Tampa, although it would have been sweet to do it against the Panthers even more, maybe, because that's the team that eliminated you last year and the team that you're probably going to end up playing, coming up. And you look at this game tonight, the Lightning and the Leafs, and I mean, yes, Toronto, they can clinch a playoff spot with a victory, but they could also solidify that divisional spot too, right? Like you look at the standings and with the Lightning losing the other night to the Detroit Red Wings and Toronto winning on that same night against Florida, there's now, I believe, a 6-point buffer between the two teams currently in the standings. Just try to pull it up right now. I should have had it up. That's on me. But I believe it's a 6-point buffer between the two clubs. And it is, yeah. You've got 89 points out of the Lightning and 95 points for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So Toronto wins tonight. They moved to 97 points. They've got an 8-point buffer with just 7 games to go for both teams, actually. Like this win could not only solidify a playoff spot, but also, I think, a top 3 spot in the Atlantic.
Yeah, and that's kind of crucial because you get into the wild card and you have no idea what's going to happen, right? Like people say, we remember had those discussions about dropping down to the wild card that would get you potentially go through the Metro. It might not necessarily be the case. You could still end up playing a team like Boston in round 1, even if you become a wild card team, right? So
yeah, well, right now
that's how it stands. I think the Lightning and Bruins would be round 1.
Exactly. It would be Lightning and Bruins in round 1. Now, Florida's right there. Florida's only 2 points back of the Bruins for that spot potentially. But I mean, there's still an outside chance that Toronto, if they really rip off, a strong finish in Boston and Florida, both kind of crater towards the end, there's still a sliver of hope that the Leafs can end up winning this division. I think it's very unlikely, obviously, but they do have a game in hand on both of these teams and, only sit 6 points back of Boston. So, it's not impossible, but I think it's likely that Toronto probably ends up finishing, in this 3-hole. Maybe they can get to the 2-hole if they can, if Florida doesn't pick it up. They've only won 3 of their last 10 games. So that one seems maybe a little bit more likely than, launch themselves back up to the tippy top of the division. For tonight's game, though, like the Leafs, they won 4 straight regular season games against this Tampa Bay Lightning. They beat them last year in the playoffs. So like the Leafs have Tampa's number right now, which obviously is good going into tonight, but this isn't the same Tampa team as earlier in the year, Dave. This team's really starting to figure things out. They're rounding into form right ahead of the playoffs. And we all knew this was going to happen. Like, this happens every year where Tampa, kind of limps into the playoffs the last few seasons. Like, oh, they're tired, or maybe they're just, they're finally coming down from their high of being, that successful team. And no, they just, they know what's at stake. They know when to turn the switch on, and they've seemed to have done that since the NHL trade deadline. They've been arguably, one of the top 2 or 3 best teams in the league since then. They've won 8 of their last 10 games since the trade deadline, averaging 4.2 goals per game, allowing just 2.2 goals per game, and have the number 1 power play and the number 1 penalty kill in the NHL since the deadline. 96.8% on the PK. Actually, if you look at their net penalty kill, it's 103. 103%, which means they've scored more goals on the PK since the trade deadline than they've allowed, which is just insane. So that's obviously going to be something to focus on tonight if you're Toronto, making sure that you keep the special teams in check for Tampa, because that's been red hot for them and a big reason why that this team's been winning a lot of games of late.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the month of March, Kucherov's almost at 2 points a game. Braden Point has got a goal a game. He's averaging a goal a game this month. Stamkos is still pawning it, right? Like, those 3 guys are leading it offensively. You still got Rielly, even Anthony Duclair. I think he's got like 9 points in 10 games in March.
Yep. 5 goals. He's got 5 goals in 10 games since joining the Lightning. 9 points. Yeah, so almost point per game since joining.
Right. It's like, that was a pretty neat, depth addition there, right? Victor Hedman's still Victor Hedman. He's averaging well over 25 minutes a game, because he's the straw that stirs the drink for that team. Like, you got a bunch of those star guys up front. On the back end, we know that there's not exactly, it's not the same Tampa team on the back end, but as long as Victor Hedman's there and he's doing his thing, that Tampa team is still going to be a force to be reckoned with. So this ain't going to be, this is, again, it's a good test for Leafs, because not just a good team, it's a team on a roll, and that's a kind of a good way to measure yourself against a
100%.
team like this.
100%. And I mean, we'd be stupid not to mention that Vasilevskiy, the boogeyman, also rounding back into form since the trade deadline. A .926 save percentage with a 7-1 record. He's been outstanding too. And it took him a little bit to get his game going. Remember, he had that offseason back surgery, missed the first 2 or 3 months of the season, and it's taken him a couple of months to get back into the swing of things. But the way he's playing right now, Vasilevskiy looks like Vasilevskiy again, and that's scary, man. Like, for whichever team does finish atop of the Eastern standings, or I guess ends up finishing in second, I suppose, and they got to play the Tampa Bay Lightning in round 1. It's going to be a tough out, man. Whether it is, Carolina, New York, Boston, Florida, any of those 4 teams still with an opportunity to play them, it is going to be a difficult task, at some point in the next couple of weeks. That being said, for the Maple Leafs, looks like they could be getting a little bit of reinforcements for this game, Dave. Morgan Rielly apparently will be available tonight, should play. The expectation is for him to play for Toronto. Mitch Marner, however, unlikely to play tonight, but looks like this weekend is the target for him to come back. But getting Morgan Rielly back in this game will be big, because remember how good he was in the playoffs last year against the Tampa Bay Lightning? He was arguably the greatest he's ever played. Like, you look at a 7-game sample size of Morgan Rielly's career, boom. You look at or 6-game, I suppose. The 6 games from games 1 to 6 in the playoffs last year in round 1, like, that was it. Like, he put on an absolute spectacle. So getting him back tonight, I think, is going to be a big boost for this team taking on a tough Tampa squad.
Yeah, regardless of what people might think about the Leafs without Morgan Rielly, they do need Morgan Rielly back. That power play needs Morgan Rielly back. Like, they need guys that are that's where he's missed. It's the offense that he can provide, right? I know defensively you got to temper your expectations for him. I get that, but that power play, there's a reason why the power play is not so good. There's a reason why point men on the power play are actually important to a team, right? Like, having an Austin Matthews is good. If you don't have that guy at the point, kind of doesn't matter too much, right? So that's, I think, where I think his value will really come once he's back in the lineup.
Yeah, you talk about how poor that power play has been over the course of the month of March. 8.5% since March 1st. 8.5%. Brutal.
Gross.
Just at their net power play is 6.4. They've given up more. They're the opposite of Tampa. Like, they've given up more shorthanded goals than they've scored power play goals since March 1st. That's not bueno, not good. And I think him coming back should be able to help that out. Like, as good as Con or Timmins was the last couple of games, with a little wink wink, I think Morgan Rielly will be a big addition, not only at 5-on-5, but also on the power play. And he comes back with 8 games to go, gives him an 8-game stretch to ramp himself up and get ready to go for the playoffs, for go time. And then hopefully, like I said, Mitch Marner, the update there was they're targeting this weekend for Marner against Montreal for him to return. Sounds like Ilya Samsonov could get the start as well. He was not on the ice for, it was a canceled practice. We'll talk about that in a sec. But he wasn't on the ice. Wall and Jones were, as they were just facing some shots, which leads me to believe that Samsonov was resting today because he plans to get the start in the game on Wednesday. Do you think that's a good assumption on my end, or you think maybe we see Joseph Wall play tonight?
It's tough to say. I thought maybe this would have been a good game to get Joseph Wall because Samsonov has played the last couple, but at the same time, Samsonov's on a bit of a roll. So it'd be nice to keep that momentum for him going for sure. But yeah, it's tough to really know for sure because there wasn't a practice today. Morning skate will obviously speak a little more to that, but I guess default to Samsonov until Keefe says otherwise.
Well, I think you've got a few games coming up where you could play Joseph Wall, like in Montreal this Saturday. That could be a good spot to play Joe Wall, or potentially, at home against Pittsburgh on April 8th. You got a back-to-back next week against Pittsburgh and Jersey. One of those two you could give to Joe Wall if you wanted to, or like I said, this Montreal game this weekend. So I think Wall's games, they'll come. He'll get a couple more starts. Obviously, I think you're going to want to get Samsonov some rest too, if he is the guy who you're going to be riding, hopefully on a long playoff run. Give him a couple of games off, couple of days off also down the stretch to make sure that he's ready to go for, a 2-month journey, which is obviously what the Maple Leafs are hoping to do. And rest is key, which was obvious when you look at what happened Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday morning. Sheldon Keefe canceled practice just 1 hour ahead of when it was scheduled. So let's get into that on the other side, on why he decided to cancel practice and what it possibly means for the Maple Leafs moving forward. And we saw the Leafs ECHL affiliate, the Newfoundland Growlers, fold today. Operations ceased immediately. We'll explain what that means for the Maple Leafs and their affiliates and their prospects going forward as well. So we'll talk about all that on the other side. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down a closer it gets to first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in pricing, views your receipt, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets and also NHL tickets for that matter. They have last-minute ticket deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater events. They've got flash deals where you can save even more on exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game or the event. They've got all-in pricing. They got some toggling on this feature that'll shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at the checkout. But here's what I love. They've got the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 100% of the difference. And the Game Time ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Perhaps use it tonight if you plan on picking up a ticket to go and see the Leafs and the Lightning. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. We are hosts here at the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf centric podcast. We've got shows coming out 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And if you haven't subscribed, wherever you get your podcast from audio-wise, but also up on YouTube, we are doing a giveaway. Once we get to 5,000 subscribers, we're giving away a jersey. So go ahead, subscribe if you haven't already, and get that daily Leafs dose right to you each and every day from us here from Locked On Leafs. All right, so we got the game tonight, Leafs and Lightning, and on Tuesday, Sheldon Keefe, interestingly, ahead of the game, canceled practice just 1 hour before they were scheduled to skate and have themselves a hard practice in between games. He decided that he was going to cancel practice instead. Dave, what do we know about the reasoning for this?
Yeah, I mean, we knew this is not the first time Sheldon Keefe has kind of canceled practice. He did it after
he did it last week, but I think it was because of like injuries.
He said he literally did not have enough guys to run a practice.
Yeah, I don't think that was the case in this one. Bit of a different situation, I believe.
Yeah, like it didn't really get. I didn't get like a full out reasoning behind it. I kind of saw like they're trying to give guys rest and things in between games and things like that. Like, they've been doing.
That's what it's all about, right? It's about getting rest. You're at that point in the season where, guys are getting a little run down, and there's bumps and bruises, and this team's been battered and bruised and beaten over the course of the last little bit. Obviously, look at the injury report, and how many times have had guys miss games, or how many times people have missed with illness, whatever it may be. Rest and recovery is becoming very important for this squad as the playoff nears. And Sheldon Keefe came out today when he spoke with the press and said that, when this happened last week after that New Jersey game that you were mentioning, he felt that the group responded really well the following game. And they did. They absolutely clobbered. Was that the Washington game that they played next? I think it was the Washington game.
Yeah, the 5-1 win.
Yeah, and they absolutely clobbered Washington. It was a full 60-minute game. They played, excellent, and he liked how the group responded with the rest. He felt that, it gave the guys more energy and jump right out the start. So I kind of like it. I think that it makes sense at this point in the season. You could use the term load management if you'd like, but getting some of the guys who've played a lot recently and are playing hard here down the stretch, giving them just a day off their feet and maybe an extra video session, a couple of team meetings, maybe that will benefit them a little bit more here down the stretch than a full practice would.
Yeah, I mean, at this point in the season, like we've seen we saw them last year rest guys from games.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? Like practice, they've done some hard practices. They got guys who are banged up who need a little extra work. I understand it makes it a little bit tough to reintegrate those guys into the line if you're not doing practices. But like they have the schedule gets compressed at this time of the year. Travel too plays a factor. If you don't need to have a practice, especially after you played a game, they've found ways to make it work, right? Like give the day off after a game, and then you're back for maybe a little more of a longer morning skate than what you used to.
Yeah, and maybe that's what we'll see, ahead of the Lightning game, later on this morning. But we did still see a couple of guys go and take a twirl out on the ice, despite being given the day off. We'll say day off in terms of practicing. I believe there were still like team meetings and stuff, but John Tavares went and joined, guys like Marner and Rielly and out on the ice, along with Joseph Woll and Martin Jones, who the reason why I think Samsonov's going to start tonight is because I think if Woll and Jones were going to get the start, they probably don't practice with a canceled practice, and that's why Sammy took the day off, knowing that he's going to get back at it 48 hours after making another start. And then William Nylander actually went and got his own ice pad and did his own little skills session. I saw some footage on TSN of him going through whatever routine he does and whatever puck touches he needs that he's used to doing on an off day. He just wanted to stay in rhythm, which I kind of love. I kind of love that out of Willie. Hopefully that means that he's going to remain. He believes he's in a good place. He doesn't want to be thrown out of whack, so he went out of his way to go and make sure that he got the ice, the skate that he needed, the ice touches, the puck touches, or whatever to keep him kind of in check, which I appreciate.
You do appreciate that because he knows that he's not getting this type of work in is going to be a lot harder in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Right. Working on things that you feel like you need to work on. And at the same time, trying to get himself ramped up and ready to go. Right. He's been off for quite a bit here. He doesn't, for a fact, he's not going to want to come into the lineup and be off, be rusty, be sluggish. He wants to make sure that he is also all systems go when it's time for him to be back when he comes back in the lineup as well.
Yeah, 100%. So we'll see what ends up happening there when he does return. But all right, so there's an interesting story that kind of stinks, to be honest with you, coming out of Newfoundland, which is the East Coast, the ECHL affiliate team of the Toronto Maple Leafs. They have folded. They ceased operations effective immediately. We'll tell you the whole story on what happened, why it happened, and what to expect going forward on the other side. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the big tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your $5 bet wins. It's $200 to use on point spreads, money line. You can even pick who you think's going to win it all, or you can use it on tonight's game, Leafs and Lightning, who you think's going to win, potentially a goal prop, an over-under prop, whichever. You can use it on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on the college hoops until they cut down the nets. You can also bet on the NHL. FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Network. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. Bit of a tough news today out on the Rock. Our friends out in Newfoundland, the ECHL Newfoundland Growlers, ceased all operations today. And what does that mean? Well, it means that the team has folded and they are effectively now just going to cancel the 6 remaining games that they had on the season. And it's really unfortunate. Obviously, the Maple Leafs have strong ties with this team, and they have a couple of players who are, whether it's a Marlies or a Maple Leafs contracted player that were with the Growlers, and now their future or at least for the rest of this season, kind of up in the air as to what happens with them. It's a really, really weird story, and it's unfortunate that it's happened. But from what I've read, and you could probably fill me in a little bit more, Dave, as I'm sure you've read into this as well. But so the league's board of governors effectively terminated the franchise's membership to the league today, effective immediately. Basically, they were given an April 2nd deadline to sell the team. They had, I guess, bounced a couple of checks, for lack of a better word. They ran into some financial difficulties and were given until April 2nd to sell the team in order to salvage it. And they were unable to do so. And the team the league, the ECHL and its board of governors basically they pulled the plug on the Growlers. Did I sum it up well, or is there anything else that
Yeah.
you can add to what happened?
Yeah, I know. Like it's a very. I mean the because the people that own the Growlers also own the franchise
Trois-Rivières.
Trois-Rivières Lyon.
Yeah.
They are the Canadians ECHL affiliate. Apparently, they're okay for now, but that team's also dealing with financial hardships as well. And there was concern that both of those franchises were going to fold.
Yeah,
The
I think they found a buyer for Trois-Rivières and the sale's pending. So they decided the ECHL Board of Governors decided to let them continue for the rest of the
Yeah.
season. But it sounds like the Growlers were unable to secure a buyer, so that's why they got the boot today.
and they've had issues like the Growlers. I mean, funny enough, I think it was their first year since when they came into the CHL. They won the Kelly Cup,
Yeah.
so they like win the Kelly Cup. I think Matt Cook was also the coach
Yep.
of the Growlers too.
Matt Cook's
And
out there. Adam Party, also former NHLer, is an assistant coach out there.
like the Leafs have quite a few players, obviously also on deals there, so that kind of impacts that side of things. Notably, the two goaltending prospect, Dryden McKay and Pexa as well. So like there's Slava Pexa, I should say, and that impacts that part. But the issues actually go back to 2021, where they were having disputes about the arena and the lease agreement, and it was a whole mess. I do remember that one. They came close to playing the part of their schedule at Coca-Cola Coliseum where the Marlies play, because they were not going to be able to play in Newfoundland, and then eventually they figured that part out. It's a tough place. Like that's a tough travel for any team to get there, especially the ECHL, where you're not making big bucks playing in the ECHL. It's the reason why the ECHL gets a little bit of cachet is they do have some affiliations with the NHL teams. Like Mike, you and I know we've gone to a few Brampton Beast games.
I worked for the Brampton Beast.
Yeah,
My first
you
job
did
in
some.
sports, I was with the Brampton Beast as like their
Yeah,
media whatever. I did an internship with them as I think it was like a media or
me,
multimedia journalist, whatever. But anyways, I worked with the Brampton Beast for half a season, so like I'm very familiar with the league. Actually, there was a member, the guy who was right above me, like the head media guy at the
yeah,
Brampton Beast. He ended up going with the team out to Newfoundland when they went out there. So, unfortunately, I believe he was still there. And I guess he woke up this morning without a job, I'm assuming. Hopefully he
yeah,
lands on his feet. But he was a terrific broadcaster for the Brampton Beasts, and then obviously with the Newfoundland Growlers. I remember when they did win the championship, it was his call that was going viral when it happened. So it's the ECHL is a really tough league. There's a really cool piece in the Athletic, and it might be honestly like the best piece that I've ever read out of that publication from Scott Wheeler, friend of the show. He did a piece where when I was actually with the team, he traveled for a full weekend on a road trip with the Brampton Beast, and he did kind of a feature, and he touched on what it was like to be an ECHLer and the hard grind it truly is, making next to nothing,
yeah.
just trying to keep the dream alive. I remember there was a story about he ended up actually getting signed by the Marlies a couple of years ago. He was a
Adam
goaltender.
D'Agostini.
Yes,
I
yes.
I
Not
interviewed
Adam,
him.
not Adam. Andrew.
Sorry,
Andrew D'Agostini.
Andrew. There's also an Adam as well, but Andrew
He
D'Agostini. I
guy was living
interviewed
in his
him.
car
Yeah,
while playing for the Brampton Beast because just it's an unaffordable.
I think he was making $500 every other week.
Yeah,
Like it was like $1,000 a month.
it is not a luxurious job to be an ECHLer. I know you're playing professional hockey, but it's tough, and I mean these teams don't make a whole lot of money either. It's why you see a lot of these clubs end up folding if they can't get the traction within their cities. The Beasts were a prime example of that happening to them. COVID kind of crushed them, but even
Yeah.
prior to that, they were struggling. So yeah, to the point that you were making a second ago, how it's tough to fund trips out to Newfoundland for a lot of these teams, because typically they travel everywhere by bus. Like, this is a busing league. They do. They legitimately bus down to Toledo.
Mhm.
They bus down to Florida, to Orlando. Like, that's just what kind of happens with the way that they do things in the ECHL. The Cincinnati Cyclones are bussing all over Southern Ontario and the northern states that they're within. So I'm sure it was a costly venture for Newfoundland to, not only for the other teams to get themselves out there, but also for Newfoundland to travel via plane for most of their games
Yeah.
because they're so far. So it's unfortunate, obviously, for the team, for the players, the coaches, the staff, everybody, affiliated with that organization, and the fans as well, who lose another pro sports franchise for the second time.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's pro sports is a business, and when a business just isn't viable anymore, it's kind of what happens, and that's where we sit now with the Growlers, who, the league decided to pull the plug. They are no more. But what really stinks is whoever had a contract, a professional contract, either with an AHL or NHL contract. So who the Growlers were affiliated with, they're ineligible to even sign elsewhere for the
Yeah.
season, and their seasons are effectively over unless they,
Get
get called up to the American League. But there are roster constraints on the American League. You can't just have 60 players there either.
Can't play everyone
So,
either.
well, that too, but even just in general, like, there's a 23-man roster in the NHL. Well, there's a 23-man. I don't know if it's 23, but there's a set man roster limit in the American League as well, right? So you can't. So even for practice, for whatever, a bunch of these guys, and I went through. There are 12 current players who are signed to AHL contracts with the Marlies that were playing with. Sorry,
13,
f- thir- 14.
14.
14
I
players. Yeah,
mm,
if you include the goalies.
right.
So including the goaltenders, there are 14 current players, who are with who are signed to AHL contracts that were playing in the ECHL, and now what they do for the rest of the season, I do not know. They do not know. It's going to be tough.
That's brutal.
Guys like Brock Caulfield, the brother of Cole Caulfield, Johnny Tyconic, Jay O'Brien, Dryden McKay, Slava Peksa. Who else was out there that I was reading? There was somebody else too. Singleton, Ty Voigt. Actually, he's injured, so he wasn't playing, but he started his season out with the Growlers, and he was playing there for up until his injury. But he's a lease prospect that kind of would have been screwed had he been playing, obviously. So there's a lot of players and a lot of guys who kind of are caught wondering what's next for them in their career. I guess the season was almost over, anyways, with about 6 games left. But really, a difficult situation for a lot of people. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, and like the Leafs will obviously figure out, a new ECHL affiliate. Like I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure at one point the Orlando Solar Bears were their ECHL
they were.
affiliate.
Yep. Yep.
They will eventually figure that part out. But
Well,
I do feel for those players who are in limbo that they're like,
yeah.
well, we basically had our feet cut out from under us because it's not our fault that we can't play in the ECHL anymore. But at the same time, now you look at the Marlies, it's like, sorry guys, like we just don't have the
Rosters.
space for you.
Yeah, the roster's full there too. So, an early off season, I guess, for these players. I mean, like I said, there was only 6 games left, and I guess the playoffs as well. So it's not as though they're missing a full season of hockey, but
Right.
it still is unfortunate that this is happening. Um, you mentioned the Leafs will obviously find another ECHL affiliate for next season, and I agree. Why not try and find something close by though? Like they did have the Orlando Solar Bears, which is pretty far south. That's, mid
Yeah.
Florida. And then they moved out to the Rock, all the way as east as you can go here in Canada. Like, it's a far, far plane ride, really. You can't even drive out
Yeah.
there. It is a far ways from Toronto. What we've kind of seen a lot of teams do is try and keep things local, especially if you are like a strong affiliate where you're sending guys in between the AHL and NHL. Like the Leafs or the Marlies had 14 players that they had signed to AHL contracts that they were sending up and down through the minors. I mean, wouldn't it make sense for them to be kind of close by, similar to the reason why the Marlies and the Leafs are close by? And you see, Abbotsford and the Canucks being close by. You're seeing a lot of AHL teams being close proximity to their NHL teams, so that if they do have to do some roster transactions or whatever, it's very easy to do when you're close to your affiliate teams. Well, wouldn't it make sense for the Leafs to maybe look, somewhere else within Ontario, Southern Ontario, maybe Northern New York, to find their next ECHL affiliate franchise?
Well, I was thinking about that. Like, if you're gonna look for something close by, I got a map pulled up. Maybe I can even share this map that I found here, just to give you a sense of where these teams are. Or, well, I mean, it's going to include the Growlers, but like, depending on what happens with this team in Quebec. So, oh, there we go. So Trois-Rivières is over here, not too far from Ontario. So that's an option there. You can look at Maine. Maine's another one there. Like, there are like, you're looking at these teams here on the right side. I know it's gonna be a little tough to see on YouTube here, but there are teams close by that you can potentially look at here. So yeah,
Well, I
it's
mean,
gonna be
you can even go into a new city. Like, you don't have to go like to
yeah.
any of these cities. I mean, like Markham. Like, what about Markham, or what about Oshawa, or St. Catharines, Niagara, London? Like, any of these teams, you could try and get in there
Well,
somehow, right? Try
you
and
have to
build
think
a
of
team there.
who's gonna front that, right? Like, who's gonna front
Dog,
the team?
MLSE can't buy a team. They don't have enough money. Like, what?
I
This
mean,
is
why didn't they?
crazy.
But my thing is, they could have just offered to help the Growlers, then to keep the least
They
for the
could
rest
have
of the
100%. They could have, and I'm not sure why they didn't, or why they aren't willing to own an ECHL franchise. I'm guessing because it's a very tough thing to do.
It's
But
hard to get money out. Yep.
if it helps, having a 3-tier organization, which is what the
Mhm.
Leafs want to be, like no other team had this many players signed to AHL contracts. I went and saw the the Marlies have more contracts signed than any other team in hockey, which meant more of those players ended up playing in the ECHL as well. And so if this organization is trying to be a 3-tier system, it would make the most sense for them to have their own ECHL affiliate, so that they're not relying on another company to run it, and apparently run it into the ground. Like, now they've got all these prospects and players who are affiliated with their teams, whether it's with the Leafs or the Marlies, in limbo, and that's not fair to them. So I don't know. To me, it would make sense for MLSE, a very rich company, to fork out whatever it costs to have an ECHL affiliate team. And if they're just breaking even, or maybe they lose, 100,000 or a couple 100,000 a year, if it benefits your organization, it benefits the Leafs, makes sense. That is a worthwhile cost. I mean, think about how much money is wasted every year from MLSE and buying draft picks, or retaining money, or doing whatever you got to, you know what I mean? Like, if you lose a couple $100,000, what's that to MLSE? If it means having a legitimate, stable ECHL franchise for your prospects and players to play for.
I think if you're gonna do that, you can go to a place that's kind of already kind of established a little bit. Like Brampton would make sense because it's close.
Yeah.
There's an arena there. They had a bit of a fan base there, so you could do that. But yeah, that's again, you're going to a board. You're going to tell them we're going to spend money, maybe not to make money or break even. It's always going to be a tough sell, but you know what? You also have to figure you throw in some money to the business towards the development of your young prospects.
That's what it
there's
is.
benefit to it.
It's putting it in the developmental budget. You're right. You're taking it from the developmental budget essentially. So that just, I don't know. It makes sense to me. Maybe that's just, that clearly is not how things are done for whatever reason. And I'm sure, if I spoke to who's the new incoming president of MLSE,
Keith
the new
Pelly.
guy, Keith Pelly. I'm sure if I asked him, he would probably have a better answer as to why they do not have, an ECHL franchise. But I don't know. For me, it just makes sense. Like it just does. But whatever. What do I know? I'm just a talking figure in the city. I don't deal with the bank accounts over at MLSE, but I know they're quite fat and large. I do know that. But yeah, really unfortunate situation there for kind of everybody involved, and we'll see what happens and where the Leafs decide to turn to next season, as they'll now be on the lookout for a new ECHL franchise. Anything else you want to get into today, or any final words before we sign off?
No, because we'll probably get on a little bit of a tangent. I'm still a little sour over the Blue Jays.
Oh yeah, no, we.
I've already got one team giving me misery. I don't need another one doing it this early in the season.
Oh, buddy.
Although they got a hit, Jays got a hit.
Oh, did they get a hit? Yeah, we're recording this at 8:20, so they got a hit. Must be first inning right away. Look at that. Look at that. The Toronto Blue Jays with a hit early in a ball game. Although they didn't do anything with it.
Actually, it was Bo Bichette returning to the lineup, getting this team back on track.
2 hits. They got 2 hits, actually. Justin Turner got on base as well, but unable to cash in the runs. All right, that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasts and platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. Go ahead, leave a like and a comment down below on YouTube. That'd be greatly appreciated. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. Leafs Lightning tonight, 7:00 down at Scotiabank Arena. Go Leafs, go. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.